This story is one of the longest and loudest debates stretching into the present day. Older than revolutions, it has sent empires to the dusty shelves of history books, brought even the most powerful states to their knees, and carried half the world behind it. For more than a century, capitalism and socialism were not just ideas, they were front lines. Behind patriotic speeches, worker uprisings, economic crises, and proxy wars, this conflict was always there. The world was shaped by this tension. Yet one thing was rarely said out loud. None of these systems ever worked as they were described in textbooks. Not once. Not anywhere. When pressure increased, war, famine, inflation, collapse, reality revealed itself without mercy. In fact, the story begins long before the words capitalism and socialism existed. For most of human history, what we call an economy today was not really an economy at all. It was simply survival. Kings claimed divine right. Landowners controlled almost everything. Peasants produced only enough to avoid starvation. Progress was nearly frozen in place. For thousands of years, life was a zero-sum game. If one rose, another fell. Wealth came from land, labor, and war. Productivity barely increased. The idea that ordinary people could become rich through trade or innovation seemed absurd. Then the Industrial Revolution arrived and overturned everything. By the late 1700s, Britain had become a pressure cooker filled with coal, iron, capital, and ambitious people. Machines replaced muscle, factories replaced workshops, and a new force emerged: private capital. For the first time, individuals could invest, take risks, and own assets on a scale once reserved only for kings. Productivity exploded. Some wages rose while other lives grew harsher. Inequality increased at a speed society had never seen before. Cities filled with pollution. Children worked 12-hour shifts. Slums bred disease. Yet one fact was undeniable. Capitalism produced more goods, more output, and more wealth than the world had ever seen. It was precisely at this moment that socialism emerged, not as a dream, but as a reaction to the brutality of industrial capitalism. In the mid-1800s, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels saw the uprisings, the smokestacks and factory floors soaked in sweat and blood. They believed the problem was not people, but the system itself. To them, capitalist wealth was stolen labor disguised as opportunity. Their solution seemed simple. If workers became partners in production, profits would be shared. If production served human needs rather than private gain, justice would follow. Exploitation would disappear. Chaotic booms and busts would end. A clean, moral, orderly system would emerge. For millions crushed beneath the gears of early capitalism, it looked like hope. But theory is one thing. Life is another. The first large-scale national experiment with socialism did not happen in a classroom, but in the ruins of an empire. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, Lenin inherited a starving, illiterate, and backward country. The Tsar was gone. The old elites had fled or been eliminated. Suddenly, a new operating system had to be built for 150 million people. The state took control of everything: land, factories, banks, resources. Prices were set by bureaucrats. Profit was replaced by production targets. Private enterprise was abolished. On paper, this promised equality and efficiency. In reality, it produced chaos. Without price signals, planners had no idea what to produce or how much. Without competition, innovation stalled. Without personal reward, workers did only the minimum. Shortages became normal. Queues became culture. Agriculture collapsed. To keep the country alive, Lenin was forced to reintroduce limited private trade. Still, socialism retained its appeal because capitalism did not look attractive either. In the early 20th century, capitalism had delivered growth, but also extreme instability. Speculation soared, monopolies tightened their grip. The wealthy lived like modern kings while millions struggled to survive. It created wealth, but failed to distribute it. Then came 1929. The U.S. stock market crashed. The Great Depression was not a normal recession. It was a global economic heart attack. Banks collapsed. Unemployment reached 25%. In some countries, entire financial systems disintegrated. For millions, capitalism no longer seemed flawed. It seemed lethal. By the 1930s, the world confronted a harsh truth. No system worked as promised. Socialism had promised equality and delivered scarcity. Capitalism had promised prosperity and delivered collapse. Then World War II reshaped everything. The war tested every major economy under maximum pressure. Despite inefficiencies, the Soviet Union mobilized its population with terrifying speed and discipline. State control redirected all resources toward survival. Meanwhile, capitalist countries like the United States transformed into industrial supermachines, showing how powerful private innovation could be when paired with national coordination. When the war ended, the debate was no longer ideological. Numbers spoke: GDP, infrastructure, growth, living standards. From 1945 to 1991, the world became a laboratory. On one side stood the Soviet bloc, central planning and state control. On the other stood regulated capitalism. The results were clear. The Soviet Union industrialized rapidly, but innovation stalled. By the 1970s, a country capable of building rockets could not produce a decent refrigerator. Capitalism, meanwhile, adapted. Regulations, social security protections, and laws were added. It did not become fair, but it became livable. By the 1980s, the gap was undeniable. The Cold War ended not through ideology, but through performance. The Soviet system collapsed not under bombs, but under its own stagnation. Yet the story did not end there. The 2008 financial crisis reminded the world that capitalism's instability had not disappeared. It had merely changed form. At the same time, socialism returned in a softer shape. Healthcare, education, taxes, unions. Today, no country practices a pure system. Every nation is a hybrid, because the truth is simple: human nature does not change. Power gathers either in money or in the state. Greed sometimes becomes innovation and sometimes exploitation. Equality sometimes becomes solidarity and sometimes oppression. When we step back and look at the whole picture, it becomes clear. No major country lives under a pure system anymore. History could not sustain it. Markets and state power intertwined. Freedom and control, incentives and protection sat at the same table. This was not an ideological victory, but a compromise forced by reality. Human nature never vanished under any system, it only changed direction. Ambition became invention or exploitation. Equality became unity or coercion. Power always concentrated somewhere, sometimes in capital, sometimes in government, sometimes in invisible institutions. That is why the real question was never capitalism or socialism. The real question was always this: who holds power, who controls it, and who limits it? Which systems can recognize their own failures and correct them? Which structures reward productive behavior while restraining destructive ones? History did not choose an ideology. History preserved what could adapt. Systems that could not renew themselves cracked over time, no matter how strong they appeared. Rigid structures break. Flexible ones survive. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is this: this story was never really about economic models. In every era, the question was who held the steering wheel, who directs resources, who writes the rules, and who pays the price. Power does not disappear. It does not retire. It only changes hands. and history never stops keeping score.